Yesterday, Mason shed tears of emotion during a childbirth he attended. However, he was actually the perpetrator of that incident that occurred last year. It was a heinous crime that I would rather forget. Someone took the lives of my parents. Despite the diligent efforts of the police, no evidence linking the culprit was found, and the case remained unsolved. The person who took my parents away from me would be found like this at such a time. Initially, I desperately wanted to believe it was all a mistake. But as the truth unfolded one after another, I was left speechless. My name is Charlotte, and I'm 30 years old. I've moved away from my parents' home and now work for a food manufacturing company. Since my parents were 40 when I was born, I was raised with a lot of love from them. My father was a well-known wealthy individual in the neighborhood, and our home was what you might call a mansion. However, my parents never flaunted their wealth, and I deeply respected them. I'm grateful to be the daughter of such wonderful parents. Although my busy work schedule often kept me from visiting my childhood home, I maintained regular contact with my parents. However, last year, my parents suddenly became victims of an irreversible tragedy. They were attacked by a robber, and their lives were taken. All the cash and the precious antique accessories they cherished were stolen without a trace. I saw a figure leaving through the window. At the time of the incident, I happened to be visiting my parents' home to celebrate their joint 70th birthday. I heard raised voices and rushed to their bedroom, where I glimpsed someone resembling the perpetrator fleeing. But it was pitch dark, and I couldn't see clearly. Despite the police's exhaustive efforts in the investigation, no clues leading to a resolution were found, and the case remained unsolved. At the very least, I wish they could find the culprit. Losing my beloved parents left me shattered, and I struggled to recover. However, it was Mason who gently stood by my side during those difficult times. Later, he became my husband. I met Mason at a bar where an acquaintance was hosting an event. Mason, noticing my distress as I sat at the counter, treated me to a cocktail. Wait, this is for me?
You seemed really down, so have this drink and cheer up.
Thank you.
I'm Mason, a freelance writer. If you'd like, I can be someone to talk to.
His calm demeanor immediately put me at ease, and I confided in him about the incident without holding back. Mason listened silently, and I felt a weight lift off my heart. From then on, I grew increasingly drawn to him. Just 1 month after we met, we started living together. And whenever fear or anger from the past incident overwhelmed me, Mason would hold me gently.
Continuing to be bound by the past won't bring peace to your parents in heaven. Let's try to forget the pain sooner.
With those words, he took me to various places to lift my spirits. Mason was fundamentally kind. He excelled at his job, and his income was substantial. Perhaps it was a professional habit, but he always seemed to be researching something on his computer whenever he had spare time. However, there was one incident in the past when Mason suddenly erupted in anger. It happened when I touched the safe in his room while trying to dust it off.
Don't touch that.
Mason glared at me with a frightening expression I had never seen before. Oh. I'm sorry. I was just trying to clean, and I didn't realize it was something so important. Then, he seemed to snap back to his senses, returning to his usual calm tone.
No, I should have explained properly. Actually, there are work documents inside.
According to Mason, there was confidential information related to his interviews that he couldn't disclose. He admitted that he had shouted out of fear that this information might leak and jeopardize his work.
Charlotte, promise me you won't look inside.
Understood. I promise. So, I made sure to avoid the safe as much as possible, always being cautious. Despite this minor concern in our life together, everything else went smoothly. 2 months after we started living together, I became pregnant with his child.
Is my child growing inside Charlotte's belly? I can't wait to meet them.
Mason said with great joy. He was thrilled, and we promptly submitted our marriage registration. Considering my parents were no longer with us, we decided to have a quiet wedding with just the 3 of us after the baby was born. Time flew by, and soon I reached the final month of pregnancy. With the help of an acquaintance who was a midwife, I gave birth at home.
Oh! This child is my daughter.
Mason choked up as our lively baby cried out. Having Mason, who rejoiced so much at our child's birth, filled me with immense happiness. However, when Mason uttered his next words, I felt a slight unease.
Now I can finally breathe easy. It's been such a long journey.
Did you say something?
Huh? Oh, it's nothing. Probably just my imagination.
He replied, smiling as if nothing was amiss. Certainly, I thought I heard it. And what does breathe easy mean anyway? I was absent-mindedly gazing at Mason, who was holding our daughter. However, my thought quickly faded into insignificance because of the birth of a new life. Perhaps it was exhaustion from childbirth that caused me to mishear. But my goodness, how adorable is this child! I simply savored the happiness in that moment. That evening, the midwife left, leaving only Mason, our daughter, and me at home. Mason seemed particularly elated by our child's birth, drinking in the living room with several beer cans strewn across the table. Meanwhile, exhaustion from childbirth overwhelmed me, and before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. The next day, as I shuffled to the bathroom, I passed by Mason's study. He was nowhere to be seen. He must have already left for work. Wait, Mason forgot to lock the safe! Given his heavy drinking the previous night, it was easy to imagine that Mason had gotten quite drunk and accidentally left the safe unlocked. Wait, something is protruding from inside. He had explicitly told me not to look inside, so I intended to leave it be. However, the sturdy safe door posed a risk. If it closed suddenly, whatever had popped out might get crushed. Reluctantly, I decided to peek inside and put it back in the safe. Little did I know that this would be a fateful turning point. What on earth is this? At that moment, I saw something completely unexpected. And a thought crossed my mind. Could it be? No, that's impossible. But I desperately wanted to believe it was a mistake, but I couldn't leave it unexplored. As I investigated further, the truth became increasingly undeniable, and my deep sadness eventually transformed into anger. In the end, I resolved to take matters into my own hands and put an end to it. One evening, 2 months after giving birth, I slowly approached a black shadow fumbling in the darkness. Suddenly, I flicked on the room's light. Mason, what are you doing there?
It's so bright. Don't startle me like that.
We were in Mason's study. Late at night, he was rummaging through the safe. "What are you holding?" In response to my question, Mason quickly hid his hand behind his back.
This is a necklace I bought for Charlotte. I just hid it in the safe to surprise you.
Mason appeared perfectly ordinary, even managing a slight smile. But I was no longer fooled. "You're lying."
Why are you making such a scary face?
"That necklace belonged to my parents, cherished by them." "Let me be direct. Mason, you were the one who sent my parents to the afterlife, weren't you?" As I spoke, the smile vanished from Mason's face. In reality, on the day the safe door was left ajar, I realized that Mason had been secretly keeping the heirloom that was believed stolen by a burglar, my parents' keepsake. And what had popped out from the safe was precisely the necklace Mason now held before me.
Why am I automatically assumed to be the culprit?
His voice grew lower, almost thunderous. "The fact that you possess the supposedly stolen accessory is irrefutable evidence, isn't it?"
There are plenty of similar designs out there. Stop jumping to conclusions, or I'll get angry too.
Despite sensing Mason's escalating anger, I couldn't back down. "Take it to the police for examination. Besides, I have an ace up my sleeve."
An ace? What's that?
Actually, the investigators in that case found hair from the suspected perpetrator. If we compare your DNA to it during the examination, everything will become clear.
Damn it! You're noticing too much.
Finally, Mason revealed his true nature, shouting in frustration. "Please, tell me everything." As I grabbed Mason's collar and shook him, he reluctantly began recounting the details of the incident.
On that day, I had done extensive research and meticulously planned everything. But then you happened to see me.
"Why did you approach me?"
I was by Charlotte's side, secretly monitoring you all along.
Fearing that my testimony might link him to the crime, Mason had initially considered eliminating me. However, I was temporarily under police protection, preventing any rash actions on his part. He changed tactics, trying to lead me away from the case, erasing memories of the past by creating new ones. His kindness during our outings was merely an attempt to rewrite my memories.
If Charlotte had shown any suspicion, I planned to stage an accident. But you were completely infatuated with me, never doubting. You were perfect as a substitute housekeeper.
To avoid arousing suspicion, Mason stored the stolen items in the safe until the heat died down. "What about the tears shed when our child was born?"
Once Charlotte became a mother, she'd forget about the criminal. So, that was a touching moment.
His matter-of-fact expression fueled my anger once again.
And yet, I managed to leave not only the safe unlocked but even dropped hair at the crime scene.
Mason clenched his lower lip, lost in thought. "Now, accept your fate and let's go to the police."
Humph. Like hell I won't do something so foolish.
Huh?
I should have done this from the start.
Suddenly, Mason tightened the necklace he held around my neck with all his strength.
With this cherished keepsake from your beloved parents, I'll send you to the afterlife. Isn't that perfect?
Stop! No matter how I resisted, Mason didn't relent. It seemed all hope was lost until the bar's master burst into the room, swiftly overpowering Mason.
Damn it! You trapped me!
It was the only way! After all, there was no hair at the crime scene. My story about the police collecting the perpetrator's DNA was a blatant lie to extract a confession. During the incident, I received an explanation from the investigators. It's unusual to have so little evidence at the crime scene, which suggests the perpetrator must be quite clever. So even when I confronted Mason with the fact that my parents' mementos were in the safe, I anticipated he would skillfully evade it. However, as a woman, I was at a significant disadvantage. To prepare for any eventuality, I had enlisted the help of the bar's master, whom Mason and I had met. I needed decisive evidence, so I devised this plan and took a gamble. Today's events are recorded, and there's no escaping it. I pointed to the camera I had discreetly set up in the corner of the room, and Mason widened his eyes as he stared at the lens. Now, let's go to the police together, I declared. But Mason interrupted.
Wait a moment. I'm a freelance writer with some income. If you let me go, I'll give up all my assets. So,
don't spout nonsense. Your credentials are likely fabricated. I cut him off. Despite Mason's thorough preparations, I suspected there had to be a reason he left the safe unlocked. Curious about any secrets on his computer, I checked his emails. Over the past few days, as I grew suspicious of Mason, I secretly observed him entering his password. And there it was, not a single work-related email. Could it be that you've been sustaining yourself through repeated crimes? I asked. Inside the safe, there were other pieces of jewelry, not just my parents' heirlooms. Frequent exchanges with someone who seemed like an illicit dealer caught my attention. The necklace, a cherished memento from my parents, had a high market value, and an offer for more than double the standard price had been made. The message was received just before my due date. And if I recall correctly, afterward, Mason was in quite high spirits, drinking beer, I said. Presumably, Mason, enticed by an unexpected windfall, had indulged in alcohol and absent-mindedly left the door unlocked. The next day, still not entirely sober, he likely forgot to close it. Well, was my deduction correct? I asked. Mason remained silent, his face contorted. I was confident my conclusion was accurate. Cut it off, I said firmly. Mason's weak voice pleaded.
Charlotte, it's true. Please forgive me.
But I stood tall before him, who was held down by the master. I'll sever ties with someone who harms my beloved parents and continues a life of crime, Mason wailed, and just then, a police car arrived in front of the house. The master had already reported the situation. Mason was led away by investigators. In the days that followed, during questioning, Mason confessed. As I suspected, he hinted at involvement in other cases. His actions likely warranted the death penalty, according to insiders. With legal representation, Mason and I finalized our divorce, discussing compensation and other matters. My 6-month-old daughter now attends daycare, and I returned to work early. We moved to a cozy apartment, where I can happily watch my daughter grow.
How did you like this story? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time.